Today we're gonna take a quick look at the Samsung Galaxy S23 and S23 Plus. Not only will there be an informative video about the new high-end smartphone from Samsung, we will also look at some of the important new features. These are now the direct successors of the S22 and S22 Plus. And like every year, there are new characteristic colors to choose from. The one you see here on the S23 is this new Phantom Black, and this new green on the S23 Plus. A charging cable, a few warranty instructions and a needle for the SIM card compartment are also included. The power charging brick can be purchased separately if you need one. So the headlining new features includes a second-generation Snapdragon 8 chip, a peak brightness of 1750 nits and 1200 nits for HDR content, an improved 12-megapixels selfie camera, and a slightly larger battery which is now said to be significantly better. The entry-level model of the Samsung S23 costs €949 with 128GB and a 6.1-inch screen size. You can expand the storage up to 256GB if you want, but this will increase the price. For the larger Samsung Galaxy S23 Plus with 6.6 inches, prices start at €1,199 with 256GB, and you can also increase the storage up to 512GB here. The colors for this year are Phantom Black, Green, Lavender, Cream, Graphite and Lime. The colors Lime and Graphite are only available on the official Samsung website. My personal favorite is the green. Feel free to let me know which one would you take. At first glance, the design of the new S23 is really very similar to that of its predecessor. On the edges we have the highly polished stainless steel frame which always matches the color of the S23, and the matte glass back which, like the front of the display, is made of the so-called Gorilla Glass Victus 2 and is therefore the most robust glass in a Samsung smartphone. According to the manufacturer, this glass can withstand falls from a height of up to 1 meter onto concrete, but I'd rather leave that to others to test. On the back there are also 3 cameras, each of which is surrounded by a metal ring, and like the outer frame it is always color matched to the S23, and next to it is the flash for illumination in the dark. Otherwise the back is kept very simple. The Samsung logo is only attached very discreetly on the lower edge in the middle. I find the all-round processing to be very good and solid. The transitions from the display to the edge and also the matte glass on the back feel very good and smooth. You definitely get a very high-quality device here. On the right side are the volume buttons, and the standby button below them. On the underside we have a USB-C connection in the middle, next to it on the left is the SIM card compartment, and on the right in this grid is the microphone and one of the 2 speakers built in. The second speaker is integrated in the earpiece at the top and works together with the one below so that they match acoustically so that they sound nice and consistent and provide good stereo sound. On the upper side you can see a small hole in which another microphone is installed. In terms of weight, the Galaxy S23 weighs 168 grams, which is really very comfortable for a smartphone, and the S23 Plus is 196 grams. When I hold the 2 devices in my hand, I personally like the S23 better because it is very easy to use with one hand and it is not too light and not too heavy. Simply perfect in feel. The S23 and S23 Plus can automatically brighten the screen depending on the lighting conditions and achieve a maximum brightness of up to 1750 nits, which means that reading the screen in everyday life and even in direct sunlight is not a problem. With HDR content, it can illuminate the screen to a maximum of 1200 nits so that the dark and bright areas of videos and images are improved. For example, the contrasts and also the colors when content is played back. Both still support 15-watt wireless charging, and up to 25-watt charging with a cable for the S23 and 45-watt for the S23 Plus. In addition, the 2 models are protected at a depth of 1.5 meters in the water for 30 minutes. The display of the Galaxy S23 has again an AMOLED panel, and a refresh rate of 120 Hz. The main difference in the new model is the maximum brightness of 1200 nits in auto mode, and depending on how strong the light is the brightness increases to 1750 nits. The refresh rate is similar to the previous model S22. When something is happening on the screen, the refresh rate increases to 120 Hz, which makes everything appear very smooth, and when the screen is still it lowers the refresh rate to as low as 10 Hz. We have a pair of stereo speakers on the Galaxy S23 and S23 Plus with Dolby Atmos support. I find the volume to be good and the sound quality is also more than satisfactory for the everyday consumer like the most of us. Under the display is a fingerprint sensor that works fairly quickly and reliably. But you have to make sure that you place your finger exactly as you did in the setup process. Alternatively, you can also use a numeric or alphabetic passcode, a face recognition or a pattern unlock. And as I mentioned before, you can get the S23 with 128 and 256 GB of storage. But keep in mind that the 128 GB model uses the older UFS 3.1 memory type, which has slightly slower data processing than the 4.0 memory type used in the 256 and 512 GB models. But the 128 GB model is still very responsive to inputs and commands, which is more than enough for most consumers. The S23's user interface is Samsung's so-called new UI 5.1 based on Android 13. Among many other changes compared to previous versions, the new user interface brings improved optimization and feels much faster and smoother. The new user interface with the 5.1 update for the S23 series adds a few features such as a new battery widget. But probably the most significant upgrade you'll find on the S23 is the new chipset. The second generation Snapdragon 8 is the new chip that will be used in the new high-end smartphones. But the new Samsung goes one step further. One has a custom version with higher CPU and GPU clock speeds. So the improvements in CPU and graphics performance over the previous generation is huge. The overall performance of the S23 is very impressive even by flagship standards. Both the S23 and the 23 Plus share the same rear camera specs as last year's model. A 50-megapixel main camera, a 10-megapixel telephoto lens and a 12-megapixel ultra-wide-angle lens. The main camera stores 12-megapixel photos by default, and the performance is solid and consistent. You get good resolution in details, good sharpness, high contrast and vivid saturated colors. The dynamic range is good and not excessive. Portrait shots taken with the main camera are very nice with detailed and colorful motifs, with good exposure and a beautifully blurred background. You can also take portraits when you zoom in, and these are just as great as the regular ones. The 3x zoom images are scaled up from 10 to 12 megapixels, but I think they are still very good. The pictures are very detailed with precise and vivid colors, have very good contrasts and a wide dynamic range. The ultra-wide-angle lens also does a good job of taking detailed photos, as you can see here. The S23 also makes a really good figure in the dark. Night mode works best with the main camera, but you can also use it with the telephoto and ultra-wide lenses if you want. The night mode is pretty impressive and makes a notable difference in quality compared to not using it. In low light conditions, the Galaxy S23 automatically switches to night mode. The photos I took here are very good with lots of detail, nice exposure, realistic color rendering and high contrast. The noise in the images is also very limited. And photos that I took without the night mode are not as lit, but I think they are still very good. Night mode images with the 3x telephoto lens also look good, giving good detail shots with low noise and vivid colors. Exposure, contrast and dynamic range are also good. And as I said before, you can also take the pictures without the night mode, but you have to keep in mind that the quality suffers in terms of noise. During the day or generally in good light, wide-angle photos look really good. However, as soon as it gets a little darker, the ultra-wide-angle lens loses its sharpness. But it's still usable, I'd say, and the color saturation is good too. The main camera can now record videos with a resolution of 8K at 30 FPS. The colors here are very lifelike and not distorted, very detailed and with little noise. The same applies to 4K video recording with all camera lenses. The quality of the video recordings in low light offers sufficient details, realistic colors and a tolerable noise level. Another change from last year is that the battery capacity on the S23 has grown to 3,900 mAh with 200 mAh extra, and on the S23 Plus we have a 4,700 mAh battery, which is also larger than its predecessor. And together with a more energy-efficient chipset, it ensures longer battery life. And there's support for wireless charging and reverse wireless charging too. With a full battery charge in the morning, I got almost 2 days. But it always depends on how much performance you demand from the smartphone and how often you use it. The choice between the Samsung Galaxy S23 and S23 Plus depends on what you personally want or what is important to you. The two differ in price at least €250 if you take the 128GB version instead of the 256 or 512GB. When it comes to battery life, there is a big difference, as you obviously get more battery life on the larger S23 Plus. And of course the screen size. Otherwise both devices have the same camera and the same performance. So if you don't feel like carrying around a bigger and heavier device and prefer the handier S23, you have a good option. Let me know your opinion in the comments down below of how you find the new Galaxy S23, or which innovations would you have wished for. It's not a huge update compared to last year's model, but there are some worthwhile upgrades like improved battery life, and there's also a brighter screen, better selfie camera, and a more powerful chipset. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed this video, and if so, then give it a like to let me know. And if you want to stay tuned for more videos like this, then please consider to subscribe to my channel if haven't already done so. See you in my next video.